in Major League Baseball at this time of the year is like 1/3 true. And whoever is the person that leaks the rumor, they have an agenda and they have something to gain by it being leaked.
Absolutely.
And so I always ask myself, when you see a story like what you see on Tuesday from Ken Rosenthal, well, who has something to gain on leaking a potential Nick Swisher rumor? And I think, potentially you may be right in that the Indians can leak this rumor and say they're trying, to move him, because that is definitely going to win them some fans in the court of public opinion. Where it's not going to win them some fans is probably with Nick Swisher. So to me, in some ways, I think if it is the Indians that somehow leak this, they're going down a road that, when you make that decision, what the fallout could potentially be, and you may make some waves with Nick Swisher if you can't get a deal done. And and if this is coming from Swisher or another team out there, then I have to wonder, is it Swisher that potentially is quietly trying to work his way out of Cleveland? Or because the last scenario is that I believe that there's a team out there who wants Nick Swisher, and I think that's, and I don't even mean that negatively. It's just the fact of the matter. I mean, we talked about this throughout the summer and being stuck with his contract, and it's easy for a fan to say, well, trade Swisher. Well, the reasons that you want to trade him is the reasons why nobody else wants him. So it's not going to be easy, and as crazy as it sounds, the guys that they have talked about, or the bad contracts that have been rumored out there, at least in my opinion, Jerry, they're all worse than Nick Swisher. If that's possible, they're worse. Because Swisher and then has an option for 2017, and his option is a mutual
but it's
option
his, isn't
that
it?
kicks in on incentives. It's on plate appearance.
Okay. All right. I was going to ask you about that because I may have been misunderstood. I thought it was vesting by plate appearances, but it was his option to go with. I didn't think it was mutual. I thought it was his option. That clears that up. He and Michael Bourne both have an option for 2017. If they get 550 plate appearances in 2016, the option kicks in. So both of them hit that plateau in their first year with the Indians. Neither of them hit it last year, and I don't think you would be labeled a pessimist to believe that the chances of them hitting that plateau mark in 2016, the way their Indians careers have gone so far, is probably slim. So I think, if you're betting, it's fair to say that there are 2 years left on both of those contracts. The three names that are talked about, were Ryan Howard, Ubaldo, and Ryan Howard is signed through 2016, and that has a $10 million buyout. B.J. Upton are both signed through 2017. So if you're trading bad contracts for bad contracts, light at the end of the tunnel for Nick Swisher and or Michael Bourne is probably sooner and a quicker light to get to by sticking with those guys than maybe the alternatives out there. Now, where I think, there's something to this is I think the Indians are open to an idea of any of these guys, but you're not going to trade contract for contract. If you're going to agree to swap your declining aging player for my declining aging player, the trade negotiation isn't really going to be Ryan Howard or any of those guys on that list for Nick Swisher. It's going to be, the trade negotiations is going to be who is going to pay how much and what kind of players am I going to be compensated for because you're going to pay a lot. And that's where I really think it would get interesting, Jerry, because to me, the Indians,
we all wrote our stories within the last month of how the Indians have somewhere between $10 and $12 million kind of on their payroll. They have about 70 to 75 million in payroll commitment for 2015 after picking up Mike Aviles' contract. You're probably closer to that 75. So for rough math, you can say with some approximates in arbitration, they have about $10 to $12 million if you believe that they're headed to that $85 million threshold. Well, where it gets real tricky is a year from now, some of their long-term contracts that they've put in with Jason Kipnis, Michael Brantley, and Carlos Santana, and Yan Gomes, they all start to kick in. And that cushion that they have in 2015 is all going to be gone 12 months from now when we're talking about payroll. And that doesn't even include if you want to start talking about if you want to extend Cody Allen before he hits arbitration and gets paid a bunch of money for closing games, or if you want to do an extension with Corey Kluber, or if you want to try and go down the road now or a winter from now with Carlos Carrasco if everything, goes fantastic of the season. Those guys are all extension candidates, and they've kind of reached their current payroll threshold when you hit 2016. So my thought is, we talked about this at the trade deadline, have been open to eating players' salaries for the rest of the year to get a good player in return. They make that payroll commitment, and when they see that their season's not going well, and they did that this year. I mean, they tried to get better players in return from Washington and St. Louis because they were willing to pay Justin Masterson and Asdrubal Cabrera for the rest of the year. We also know that the Indians to this point have never eaten salary of another player. I just wonder if the Indians would be willing to eat half of Swisher's remaining contract, or essentially eat his 2015 salary, because they've basically kind of already budgeted that, provided the team that takes him picks up the tab for 2016, and if his option vests, they're responsible for that. That would open up a ability for them come 12 months from now to be able then to really consider extending some of those guys without probably blowing by that $85 million number, or, God forbid, letting one of them hit free agency or having to trade a core member because they gave Nick Swisher too much money. And I think that's a possibility. If the Indians are willing to eat half of his salary, if they're willing essentially to pay him to play somewhere else in 2015, I think the door opens. And I don't know that necessarily has to result in getting a bad contract back. Under that deal.
No, and I like where you're going with that, because that's another way to look at that too. I'm with you. I feel that there's a reason that got out. There's whoever's agenda it was that was being served, you can figure that out. But the fact that they're even kicking the tires on this, and you know what, that's a heck of a point about. Traditionally, they wouldn't eat that kind of money, but theoretically, it's already spent money for next year as far as they've already kind of budgeted things. So I can see the thought process of, it's almost like, paying a big chunk of a bad investment up front just to get it done and out of the way, and then, instead of eating it for the next 10 years or whatnot. And that's an interesting way to look at it.
Jerry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm saying that's an interesting way to look at it, and that's a different way than just the bad And you know me, I like Ubaldo, so my thought was at least he can only kill you once every 5 days, and then if that doesn't work out, then he just costs you money, but he doesn't actually have to play. And because Swisher, they're still going to force him out there. And there's the other thing is, I think that's what makes them open to it. It's not the lack of production. It's the fact that he's pigeonholed. The fact that he can't play really the most positional positions either. It's different if we can still use you like you talked about in that first season. We thought we got, some serviceable defensive play out of you as well. But once we've now established it, we're pigeonholed into this, DH occasionally, maybe once a week, getting you out there in the field thing. Now you're handcuffing us all kind of ways. And so now the Indians open up even more to go, and we have to, just because of that. I think if he was more pliable in the field even, then they're way less willing, like we just saw, to do anything with him. But now they're like, look, this is only going to get worse if we're being real.
Yeah, and I think I agree, and I think there's so many ripples off of this if we're really going down this road. And you touched on Ubaldo. I am not in favor of getting the band back together on that one. I think we all remember Ubaldo's great September, but don't look at those numbers from 2013 and think of that as a season. That was a good month. He was pitcher of the month. Don't ever forget that with 6 weeks to go in that season, they skipped his start and let Danny Salazar make his second ever big league start. They felt that a guy making his second big league start ever against the Tigers was a better move than letting Ubaldo run out there. I'm not sure I'm willing to jump back on that board because they found magic somehow in September of 2014. I'm not sure I'm ready to jump back on board for 3 more years of Ubaldo. But I think, something, again, to consider, if you want to start looking to take Nick Swisher, as crazy as it sounds, you have to look at places in the short term. Because no one's trading for Nick Swisher because they feel it increases their 2015 chances. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. And I
war's not
I know
very
it sounds
high,
awful, but there's no other way to say it than sell to anyone else. Adding Nick Swisher is going to make us better. So, I mean, I think you have to consider some teams that are potentially rebuilding that may be willing to take him, especially if the Indians are willing to eat some salary. And you may have a deal where maybe the Indians trade a young player or two with him and eat salary for the opportunity to get back a player now.
And you know what?
I look at a team like the Tampa Bay Rays, Jerry, who have lost their price, who they are looking in the short term to cut payroll, to retool. Their minor league system is really, for a system that has been, kind of touted, is really kind of struggling. Is that a team that may take Nick Swisher because they know they're not going to win in the next couple years? May eat some of that, may be willing to pay some of that salary if the Indians are, and maybe take on someone like a Jose Ramirez also that they can try and build around, or maybe a young pitcher like a Trevor Bauer. Would they be interested in one of those guys and Swisher if they send some that can potentially help the Indians win right now? Those are the places you have to look. I came up with 4 teams that I fit that criteria. The Yankees, and I think they all kind of fit that bill of a team that is going to try and retool, that doesn't have a lot of young players that they could build around. Houston is the exception. They are chock full of young players, but they could take someone in a short term to fill a need to get better. I mean, they have a target of 2017. So, they would be free of Nick Swisher likely by then. But, those are teams that I think, would consider taking Nick Swisher at half price if the Indians eat his salary for a year, and maybe the Indians give them a young player or two. The Indians get something back that helps them win now. I mean,
maybe
I think that's a situation
because
you can paint.
He left there, came here. Maybe, you could sell the whole going back, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Coming home, I've heard that's a thing that catches on with people, I mean, it's a catchy
seems to work.
Slogan to go with. It's been a hit around here,
Seems to work, man.
I mean, just a thought. And I think another real wild card in this is the Atlanta Braves too. They have a bad contract in BJ Upton that I wouldn't really want to get anywhere near unless
I don't know, someone had to, you were forced, but I think, I think the door may be a little wider open for the Indians to make a deal with them. I'll be honest,